Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. At UFC 275, Jiri Prochazka won the light heavyweight title by defeating Glover Teixeira by 5th round rear naked choke. And what an amazing fight. It was crazy. It was back and forth. I did an entire post-fight show live after UFC 275. You can check that out on the channel. I will link it down in the description. But now that Jiri Prochazka is the light heavyweight champion, a lot of people are asking what's next for Jiri. Who is he going to try to make his first title defense against? So I figured I'd make a list of the 3 most likely opponents that Jiri Prochazka fights next. And I'm going to go from 3 to 1, 3 being the least likely I think the UFC is least likely to make, 1 being the most likely in the fight that I think will happen next for Jiri Prochazka. So guys, do me a favor, if you enjoy these types of videos, make sure to like the video, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. So before I even get into the top 3 list, I have 2 honorable mentions that I don't think are super likely to happen, but I would love to see these potential matchups, and I think they're somewhat plausible, so I figured why not throw them into the list. So first honorable mention on the list is Jiri Prochazka versus Johnny Bones Jones. I mean, this fight isn't super likely to happen. Jones relinquished his belt back in 2020 after defeating Dominic Reyes, and he has plans, and he's still negotiating with the UFC. He's going to move up to heavyweight, fight either Stipe Miocic or potentially Francis Ngannou. They're aiming for John Jones versus Stipe Miocic, I think in September of this year. Who knows if that's actually going to happen. I really don't think this fight's going to happen, but who wouldn't love seeing the crazy, wild, savagery style of Jiri Prochazka versus the consensus greatest of all time light heavyweight in Johnny Bones Jones? I would love to see it, especially after the inactivity of John Jones. You know, prime John Jones, I would pick him to beat Jiri Prochazka. But now that he's been off for 2 years, over 2 years at this point, and by the time this fight would be made, it'd probably be closer to 3 years, I would love to see this stylistic matchup. John Jones, you know, being the guy that has the highest fight IQ, just super well-rounded, has great wrestling, has great ground and pound, has great clinch, variety of attack, against Jiri Prochazka, who's just an absolute savage, moving forward, looking to take your head off, has nasty power in all his limbs. I would love to see this fight, and this would actually be a dream fight of mine, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think Jones' next fight will be at heavyweight. So moving on to the next honorable mention, and this is a fight, if you've been following the channel, this is a fight that I've mentioned recently in a video of top 5 fights I would like to see the UFC make towards the end of 2022, and this was actually an honorable mention in that video as well, just because I didn't think it was super likely to happen, and that is Jiri Prochazka versus middleweight champion Israel Adesanya. Who would not love to see that fight? Israel Adesanya has some of the most technical striking in all the UFC. He's a dominant champion. A lot of people are saying the middleweight division is so boring, the middleweight division is so terrible. I think it has to do with the fact that Israel Adesanya has been so dominant within the division that, you know, people are like, oh, this division's garbage. But when you have a long-reigning champion who's beating guys like this, and I know his last few performances haven't been the greatest. The Marvin Vettori fight wasn't that exciting. The Robert Whittaker rematch wasn't all that exciting. But Israel Adesanya is one of the best fighters in the UFC, and what he's been able to do over the course of his championship run, what he did to Paulo Costa, then he went up and he fought Jan Blachowicz. He lost that, and now, you know, he's won a couple more fights after that. He's always had a goal of winning the 205 championship. So what better matchup for him than Jiri Prochazka? Jiri Prochazka is probably not going to try to take him down. Jan Blachowicz was able to take Adesanya down, control him on the ground, and even outstrike him. Glover Teixeira would have put a career-altering beating on Adesanya. He would not have been able to get out from underneath of him. So I would love to see Jiri Prochazka versus Israel Adesanya, champion versus champion. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense right now, especially you got Adesanya attempting to defend his belt at UFC 276 against Jared Cannonier. You have Jiri, who's not a dominant champion. He just won the belt, hasn't even defended it yet. So it's not a fight that makes a lot of sense, but Jan Blachowicz had just won the belt when Adesanya moved up and fought him for the light heavyweight championship to try to become double champion. And, you know, I think this is possible down the road if they both keep winning their fights. But as of right now, I think, you know, Adesanya, the UFC is angling for that Alex Pereira fight if he's able to beat Sean Strickland at UFC 276. And I think both these guys are probably a year or two away from potentially fighting each other if they both do continue to win. Okay, moving on to the top 3 list, starting at number 3 on the list. And this is a fight that I would absolutely love to see again. Jiri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira 2. I mean, after that first fight, who doesn't want to be signed up for the second fight? I mean, that fight at UFC 275 was absolutely amazing, back and forth. What a crazy war. The fact that there were so many momentum swings. I mean, Glover Teixeira would be in full mount, raining down elbows, brutalizing Jiri. Next thing you know, Jiri's scrambling out. Glover's trying to grab his back, but Jiri gets up, then starts lighting Glover up on the feet. What a fight. My favorite fight probably of all time. I'm trying to let it cool down a little bit because of recency bias, but that may have been the greatest MMA fight we've ever seen. Jiri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira. So why not book it for a second time? Glover Teixeira was 30 seconds away from winning this fight. He was going to win on the judges' scorecards, but he was gassed. He made a mistake. Jiri Prochazka just refused to lose, snatched up the neck of Glover Teixeira, and won via rear naked choke in the 5th round. Why not run that back? Now, I believe that Jiri, also Glover, they need a good amount of time off. And also, I believe because of Glover's age, I don't know if the UFC is going to be rushing to throw him back into a title shot. As sad as that is, we all like Glover. He's 42 years old, going on 43. I don't know if the UFC wants to put him back in a fight against Jiri, considering we've seen in the first fight, he has a very good chance at winning that fight against Jiri, even though he lost this one. But I mean, I really think the fans would get behind it. It was an amazing matchup. Maybe Glover can go off, win one fight. Jiri can go defend his belt once, and then they could rematch it. But that's why it's number 3 on the list. I just don't think the UFC wants to make this fight. They have Jiri Prochazka, who's super young, 29 years old, super promotable. Why throw him back in there with Glover Teixeira? There's other matchups that are very compelling. And, I don't think they want to throw him back against Glover Teixeira that quickly, especially after all the damage he took. He's going to need some time off. Both guys are going to need some time off. So moving up the list to number 2, and I think this is a fight that could happen. It's kind of in a similar scenario of the Glover fight, but that is Jiri Prochazka versus Jan Blachowicz, the former champion Jan Blachowicz. Again, this is kind of in the same category as number 3, and that's why it's not number 1 on the list, even though I think most people are expecting this fight. Jan Blachowicz is getting up there in age as well. They just got a super promotable champion in Jiri Prochazka, and I think they're going to want some new blood, and that's what I'm going to get to it in a minute with number 1 on the list. But this would be a great fight. Jiri's wild style against the legendary Polish power of Jan Blachowicz. And Jan is very well-rounded, but I don't think he is a fighter that is going to be able to go out there and be dominant in the grappling against Jiri. And I think this is a very winnable fight for Jiri. I think he has to be a little bit more methodical. He can't get too wild and get clipped by that legendary Polish power of Jan Blachowicz because he will get KO'd. Glover Teixeira has good power. Jan Blachowicz is on another level as far as power in his hands, and he's a little bit younger, he's a little bit faster. I think he has a bit better striking than Glover, and I think this would be a massive fight. And Jan Blachowicz just lost the belt, but he got a win over Alexander Rakic, which at the time I thought if Rakic won that fight, the UFC was going to make the winner of Jiri versus Glover fight Rakic next. But Rakic lost that fight, but it was kind of a controversial ending. Rakic hurt his knee. Whether Jan calls that or not, it's still a weird ending. So I don't know if the UFC in their minds are going to say, let's throw, I think Jan Blachowicz is 38 or 39. Let's throw 38 or 39-year-old Jan Blachowicz against Jiri because, again, they want some new blood in that division. But also, this would be a great fight. You have Jan Blachowicz from Poland. You have Jiri Prochazka from the Czech Republic. This would be a massive fight. They could headline a pay-per-view in Europe. And the matchup sells itself. I mean, a nasty power puncher in Jan Blachowicz against a wild striker in Jiri Prochazka. This would be a fun fight while it lasted, and I definitely see somebody getting finished in that fight. And of course, you have the angle, you have Jan Blachowicz trying to get his belt back after losing it to Glover Teixeira. Okay, moving on to number 1 on the list, and I'm wondering how many of you guys already know where I'm going with this fight. And number 1 on the list is Jiri Prochazka versus the winner of Magomed Ankalaev versus Anthony Smith. This takes place at the end of July at UFC 277. I just think this is the fight the UFC is going to make. Dana White has already said it. Anthony Smith is on a 3-fight winning streak. He would be on a 4-fight winning streak if he was able to beat Magomed Ankalaev. Ankalaev's on a very long winning streak as it is right now. If he goes out there and beats an absolute veteran like Anthony Smith, who's very well-rounded, I think the UFC is going to do Jiri Prochazka versus Magomed Ankalaev. And again, we get some youth within the division. Ankalaev, I believe, is 30 years old. Anthony Smith, he's been around forever, but he's only 33 years old. And also, these would be such compelling matchups. Magomed Ankalaev is super well-rounded everywhere, has great grappling, has power in his hands. Against Jiri Prochazka, it'd be so interesting to see how he would approach the fight, because Jiri is just such a hard puzzle to solve. The way he moves forward, the variety of attack. I would be curious if Ankalaev would try to out-grapple him. We've seen what happened against Glover. Glover traditionally gets you down, and you're not able to get out from underneath of him. Jiri showed that he could scramble out of those positions and live to talk about it. I mean, I thought for sure if Glover Teixeira got his back, he would submit him. And he got his back multiple times, and he was not able to submit him. I'd be so curious how Ankalaev would do. It would be, a massive win streak versus a massive win streak, and it would be an amazing fight. And also, Anthony Smith, it would be crazy. What a career resurgence that would be after losing his title shot against John Jones a few years ago to making his way back to a title fight. And I talk about it all the time in different videos where I talk about Anthony Smith. The guy gets trashed on way too much. Anthony Smith is an elite level fighter. He is very well rounded. He's great everywhere. And the guy just finds a way to come back in each and every fight. He refuses to quit. Look what Glover Teixeira was doing to him in their fight. And somehow he was able to just keep surviving. Eventually he got finished in the later rounds, but you get my point. There is no quit in Anthony Smith. He's come from behind in multiple fights before. And if he can go out there and beat Magomed Ankalaev, get himself on a 4-fight win streak, I think there's a chance that Jiri Prochazka fights Anthony Smith. If I had to really break down all these different matchups, I think if Anthony Smith beats Ankalaev, I think Jan Blachowicz and Anthony Smith getting the title shot is closer to 50-50, but I think if Ankalaev wins, just because of the youth, just because of the winning streak and the dominant fighting ability he's shown in the past few years, I think Ankalaev is a lock for number one if he's able to win. And then if Anthony Smith wins, I favor him a little bit to get the title shot over Jan Blachowicz, but it depends what the UFC schedule is looking like. And if they want to do a pay-per-view in Europe, if Anthony Smith wins, they might go with that Jan Blachowicz fight against Jiri. But we'll see. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Which of these fights would you prefer to see as number one? If you were making the fights, you were the UFC making the decisions, who would you book Jiri Prochazka against in his first title defense? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.